down now and then I'll... 6 questions. Quick question.
Quick question. Oh,
No chance for grandstanding, just a quick question.
okay. Thank you very much. I'm Hanneke Lang from the AgriNatura Secretariat. Thank you all very much to presenters and co-authors for these really interesting lessons and very rich information that comes out of this cross-analysis. I'm wondering, when you speak at country level, when you have these restitution workshops and you speak with national actors and stakeholders, in particular those who are able to influence processes of change, what's the kind of response on these lessons that are emerging? And also, when you go back over the years, particularly for those value chain studies that were done in the beginning of VCA4D, do you already see processes of change set in motion, knowing that it may take years, if not generations, for real change? But do you see anything started?
Okay, so impact and change. We'll come back to that. Right at the, well, let's start right at the back and work forward. Gentlemen, right at the back with the glasses.
Yes, good morning. It was a very interesting presentation. Marek Poznański from CSC and AgriCord. I wanted just to know if you, in the different approach, you take into account one of the type of market, which is the institutional purchase, the type of purchase that was done in Brazil with a social transfer. So, because I think that it can be very, very interesting, and maybe it was, well, yeah, it's an opportunity to take into account.
I think it's a very good point. A lot of these countries got prisons full of people that have no choice. Why can't they just eat the stuff from the poorest farmers? So institutional purchase, next one.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mohamed Bello from Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria. So my question is on the gender issue. Some of the findings are quite brushing, but I believe that there should be some specifics by region. Like in the case of Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, women have agency over some of the decisions they make. They own land, they can buy land, and they can cultivate them. But what we understand from findings over the years is that they're not necessarily interested in cultivating the land, but rather they prefer giving the land to their male, their husbands and children who are elderly, or their relatives to help them cultivate. What they're more interested in is in the value addition, the aspect of the activity of the farm that is not necessarily on the farm, but rather off farm. So this is an area they're interested in. So about what I'm trying to look at is that some areas they don't need land, but rather they want to cultivate, they want to raise livestock, maybe poultry.
So you need to get to a question at some point in this.
Yeah, so my question is this thing taken into account in some of the findings, and to what extent is your finding consistent with some of these realities on ground?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, what? Yeah, we'll do one more. She's in charge, so what can I do? Sorry, those are
thank you. Yes, it's not really a question, it's a comment which is very deep from my heart on the presentation of Yuka on living income. We are in contact in that, and as some of you might know, we have an initiative on cocoa at a European level. Basically, to make it short, we are supporting what Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are trying to put in place in the living income differential. And to be frank, when in your conclusion you say, look, with yields and prices, we will not make it, I fully understand what you mean. I would agree to a certain extent, but in the way you present it, it's a bit, okay, it's a scientific paper analysis explaining that it's complex and that, but on price, when you take products like cocoa, like coffee, where if you take the entire value chain, at the end, in a cup of coffee, you have 5 cents of coffee, and in a tablet of chocolate, you have 6% of the price of cocoa when it's a 90% cocoa chocolate bar or chocolate tablet. Presenting things like that is risky. And if I intervene to tell you that publicly, Yuka, is because we might and we will probably work together on that. And we have to present things differently, because if the price of cocoa, instead of being $2,500 per ton, is $500 per ton, it will change the life of cocoa producers. And it is not impossible. If the price of cocoa today is as it is, around $2,000 per ton, it's because all those who are buying cocoa, including us at the final stage, agree that cocoa producers are poor and will remain poor, that deforestation will continue, and that child labor, to a certain extent, exists. And what is true for cocoa, what is true for coffee, of course, is not true for rice production for the local market. So I think that when we are talking about living income, living wages, we have to take that into consideration much more precisely and much more vocally, I would say. Again, and last point, on a market, what determines the price of a commodity is the quantity and the quality. And when I'm talking about quality, it's not a good or not product to make super chocolates. The quality of the product is how it is produced. And if we continue to all agree that cocoa producers or coffee producers will remain poor, of course, the price will not change. But when there is a pressure from the consumers at the end of the chain, this might change. And at least this is the EU initiative on cocoa is based on that. And we're going to continue in that direction. And I hope with your support.
Oh, thank you very much. Statements of passion are also important, and I'm glad somebody's mentioned consumer agency. So I'm going to take some answers on those first, because otherwise we'll all forget what it was the question was. Who wants to go first?
Me.
Yes, why not?
Well, we have the same passion in terms of improving livelihoods, right? And improving farmer income. So what we see is, I said, there's assumptions about yield improvement and price to close living income gaps entirely of all the households. That's what we see. So the point is, the data doesn't show that's actually possible, right? So we have to be honest here. And I understand the political sensitivity, right, of such a statement. But for a lot of households, probably cash transfers, and I think the person talking about Brazil would make much more sense to close living income gaps. Because if you produce 500 or 1,000 kilo per year, even with a doubling of the price, which I wonder whether that will be happening, right? I hope it would, but we have been seeing discussions for 15 years on price. So if you produce 1,000 kilo per year, right? How could an increase in the price of 1.5? I mean, we've done all the calculations and the modeling. So the question is, what is the most relevant intervention to increase incomes of households in different segments? So if you have households who produce 4,000 kilo per year, that makes a lot of sense, the price. But if you produce 1,000 or 500 a year, so it rather matters who we are talking about. And we see half of the households in cocoa and coffee producing very small amounts. So that's the passion. So I'm not saying it doesn't work and it doesn't have an impact, because every dollar counts, right? Every dollar income increase. But if you look at the effectiveness of poverty reduction at scale, sometimes other measures could be more effective than price increase.
So maybe
I'm not against price increase. I really think we should.
We need. I agree.
Yep.
So I think this is a really big issue, and we should take it on some underpriced coffee at the coffee break, and for some months and years to come. But I want to address some of the others. So we asked, Hanneke asked about any evidence of any policy changes or things that you've seen as a result of this.
Yeah, I'll have a go at answering that. I mean, I have presented some of these, not the synthesis conclusions, but country level conclusions on both land tenure and gender at workshops or final meetings of various sizes in 2 countries. I would have to say, I think this sort of conclusion is listened to politely, but seen as part of the general political context and not really something that value chain actors can work on. The issues of land reform. In Burundi, clearly there are drivers of the way land tenure is governed, coming from the fear of resurgence of conflict, the concerns over mass return of refugees, that are simply floating there above and beyond anything that the milk value chain might require of its land tenure. But if I could go slightly sideways from that, I think there are some conclusions we come to, particularly as social sector analysts, that really might be regarded as difficult for government, even if they're sometimes a fairly minor part of the analysis. And I'm thinking of some conclusions on the freedom to join trade unions, for example. I mean, in one country, I participated in a meeting with leaders of the Agricultural Workers Union, which they insisted be held in a cafe because they felt that their offices were under surveillance. They were clearly very concerned at government harassment of independent trade unions, and particularly of their ability to speak out over health and safety concerns in what was in fact a different part of the agricultural sector. And I think as social sector experts, we should be able to speak out about that, but I clearly need some dissociation or disclaimer on behalf of VCA4D and indeed the European Union when we are doing that.
I experienced the same in Zimbabwe, so it's an interesting issue. Like to add?
I cannot speak about the 36 value chains impact at national level, but I'm going also to refer my case. When I presented results in Guinea-Bissau, it was a quite informal atmosphere. Gustavo is here. He was one of the team members. And I remember then when I spoke about the gender issues, after this presentation, the women came and they were from women organizations, and they were very happy that I was tackling these issues. So I got this very good feedback, but it was quite an informal atmosphere. As I said, in Angola, when we presented results of the coffee value chain, it was very formal with the secretaries of state present there and the entrepreneurs. I think gender was not considered. They wanted us to make a strategic plan for the coffee sector, basically. So it was even difficult for us researchers to move from making a picture of the value chain situation and then producing a strategic plan for the government. So it was. Maybe I can answer the other question.
Yes, please, while you've got the floor.
The colleague from Nigeria was asking if women want to cultivate, or they are more in, this is what I understood, or they would like more to be in adding value to in the processing sector, or adding value to the commodities. I think cultivate is always very difficult, very hard. So if women could be earning money in commercial sector, for me, it's obvious that it would be much more convenient. But what happens, and this is very clear from what we understood from the 36 value chains, is the conditions in which women work in the post-harvest activities is really, really bad, that they are really bad, and they have to combine with cultivating their own plots for the household subsistence. So what is important is to see that there are small value chains that women control from the production till the market, and those are the so-called women value chains, where they have the possibility of gaining autonomy and a sense of citizenship and freedom to decide. And this is what I think it's one of the important outcomes from this value chain.
Sandrine, do you want to add?
Yes, I would like to follow with the discussion on gender, to take just an example of something that could be better done to consider women inclusion in value chain. For instance, in Nicaragua, when we had the restitution of the results, some of the women that were in the room said that, okay, you should also consider the women working as technical assistants. A technical vulgarization in the vulgarization part, in all the services that are around value chains, to really see the contribution. Because in the case of the cocoa in Nicaragua, some women said to me, okay, it's good to process chocolate artisanally, but I'm just tired to work in the kitchen, at home and at work. So it was just a parenthesis. And I think that it could be interesting to see beyond the direct actors of the value chain, to consider the women contribution. And to answer to other question, I would say that I think that really what really talk to the people when we are restituting the results of the study is when we enter into the different subchains. And in those studies, we didn't have the time to do it, and maybe not all the data to enter into it. But I think that the stakeholders are very interested to see, okay, comparing a certified product against another conventional product, and to enter, why not, into a sub-value chain where the product is only bought by public, by the public support sector. As you said, in Brazil, for instance, we can easily think about a study that focused on the public purchase of product for school meals, for instance. And I think that it would be very interesting to follow up this kind of cross-study analysis, but entering first into sub-value chains to have more fine-tuned results to discuss, but also in some cases when the value chain are very small at the national level, to enter more into a territorial level when it can be very relevant. If I take the example of the cocoa in Nicaragua, there is not cocoa in all the countries, but in some countries, it's really important to see the dynamic inclusive in terms of employment and job opportunity, where there are no job opportunities in cities or in other sectors.
Thank you very much. So now I think we're going to face a challenge, because I think pretty much everybody in the room would like to put their hand up and ask a question, which is, to my mind, is some indication of the passion and the interest that this is raising. I've also got 9 people online that want to ask questions, who patiently waited all this time and can't show their hands very easily. So maybe you can curate a couple of questions online.
I just mentioned there are mostly comments and advices to take also into account. For instance, indigenous people rights in the issue of land tenure, to see to what extent this is explicitly or not taken into account. And along the same line, there was also a discussion about taking into account all the physical violence against women in the analysis, to see to what extent this kind of context lead to, I would say, minimum capacity of women to be able to take decision and so forth. So this is this issue that was raised. They were also coming back to the issue of taking into account in more detail the extent of women and male labor in all the stage of the value chains. This is a comment we had from the some people also mentioning the importance of land tenure rights to improve the capacity of farmers to invest in more sustainable practices, specifically on vegetables, where they have very minimum access, long-term access to land. And this is what was a comment from the internet part. But there is no, there is 1 or 2 specific questions, but we will convey it to the author.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and there were people that put their hands up very aggressively at the beginning. This gentleman in the middle has been very patient, and then you, because you were second, actually. What can I do?
Thank you very much. My name is Jochem Schneeman from the Forest for the Future facility, working for INPA, for the European Commission, INPA F2 Forest Unit. I would like to congratulate you. Very interesting presentations you have given, connected to also my expertise, value chain development. I was wondering about the land tenure. So my question is directed to John Morton. You mentioned that these customary land tenure systems do not limit the development of value chains in your studies. And I was wondering because, first of all, if investments are to be done by farmers in soil fertility, for example, or in agroforestry, also in fruit crops, which are multi-annual, is this customary land tenure situation sufficient security for farmers to make those investments for a bit a longer term, let's say? Yeah? That's my question. Yeah.
Very good. No, tree crop, special case. So do you want to have a go at yours? And just questions, no statements, just questions. Then we'll move faster, all right?
Well, thank you, Ben. I hope you don't regret. Mine is very...
Oh, just questions. Go straight to the question.
Mine is almost trivial. Living income amongst average European farmers if we deduct subsidies. And is that in any way comparable to what we see in Africa? So number one. Number two, cocoa is a special case, but take a cereal value chain that we can compare, also Europe and Africa. Where is the value generated and where do employment effects take place? Is there any similarities between the two?
No three? You surprised me. Go on, quickly, yours.
Okay, my questions, they're just quick too. The first one is on gender. Are there any specific mitigation or mitigating element identified across the study that could help in dealing with the issues of gender inclusion? And the second one is this: are there specific data to claim about job creation? What specific mapping can we see within the actors where we have the concentration of job creation?
And everybody hogs the mic. Come on. Right, okay. We're going to close the questions there. Everything else individually at coffee break. All right. Want to go first?
Okay, I'll be short. Just regarding job creation, yes, there is data in the methodology that allow us to see where the jobs are created and how much income or value added is created for different actors. But I think that what could be better done is to improve the understanding in terms of contribution of family workforce, for instance, at the stage of the production level, and in particular for family farming. And it's something that can be done in some studies and could be better done in the future studies.
Yeah, I think there was one question on living income, the EU farmers without subsidies. It's actually a good question. We know that in the European Union, there's a lot of workers actually earning below a living wage. And I would guess that's the same, but that's nice to look into. Thank you.
As for mitigation efforts, you are speaking about government. Each time the word mitigation appeared in the reports was taken in a negative way. There was no mitigation measures to give women the opportunity to use technologies so they don't have such hard work in their manual activities. So mitigation was used to underline that there is no mitigation measures. And I would like also to say that I think that we should take women not just within the value chain, the agriculture and agricultural related value chain, but as women and as citizens. And I would like to see mitigation measures that are broader than the environment, the agricultural environment, and for instance, reproductive rights. I think it would make a lot of big difference if women were allowed to decide for their reproductive rights, even in terms of their decision making in agriculture and then capacity to innovate and to engage in innovation practices.
Thank you.
for instance.
Yeah, on mitigation measures for gender inequality, I think well-designed land titling initiatives, and particularly intermediate initiatives that have low transaction costs and low requirements for chasing officials and filling in forms, can, if well designed, be a good measure for increasing gender equality. But the evidence is that that's not that good design for gender is not really happening with titling programs. On Joachim's point, I think what I said is that customary tenure does not necessarily limit the development of inclusive and sustainable value chains. There are a lot of other factors. It's not, we can't blanket say it's okay to develop export-oriented value chains with under customary tenure. But I think that not necessarily conclusion is fully in accord with what people like Shem Migotadola at the heart of the World Bank was saying in the early 90s. It should no longer be challenging to say that modified customary tenure can support long-term investment in agriculture. I agree there's an issue about credit and the use of land as collateral, but I think that is a separate issue, and that may be addressed by redesigning credit rather than redesigning tenure. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I'm sorry for those that are frustrated, but I think a fascinating conversation and a great set of questions, which we can continue now on the underpriced coffee break for 10 minutes, because we then need to get up a bit longer. Oh, we need to give the interpreter a chance. 11:35, if you could come back then, we'd appreciate it. But a round of applause, please, for these presenters. Very good.